How do we get from this chicken scratch to this beautifully engraved fingering diagram? Well, in this video, I'm going to show you how. If you're new here, my name is Saad Haddad and I'm a composer based here in New York City. Let's say you're working on something that requires you to make a fingering diagram for any of these woodwind instruments. Maybe you're an educator working with young students, or a composer that needs to add special fingerings to their scores like microtones, timbre trills, and multiphonics. In both situations, you're going to need to know how to make clear, readable fingering diagrams that you can easily import into your notation program of choice. Let's take a look at this flute fingering as an example, which is one that's taken from my clarinet concerto that I wrote back in 2019. You can see that if we added something like this to an already engraved part, it just wouldn't look consistent nor professional with everything else around it. So let's figure out how we can make that look a little better. Head over to fingering.brettpimentel.com, which is linked down in the description below, and you can follow along there. The first thing you're going to notice here is that there's going to be a fingering chart at the very top of the web page. For me, it's a flute in the horizontal position, and I can just scroll across these holes and I see here left first finger, left second finger, left third finger, right first finger, etc. And on the side keys we have thumb B, we have G sharp, and on the end here we have a D sharp key. So it shows you all the different fingering names for all the different holes, which I think is really great. Moving down here we see the download button, and this is going to be important obviously later on when you download your fingering diagram. Then there's going to be these 4 different formats: PNG, GIF, TIFF, and SVG. Now I always download all my files as an SVG file. This way I can make them bigger, make them smaller, and I find that they look the most smooth inside my notation program. Now in order to do this, you're going to have to donate a little bit of money to Brett's page, which I think is definitely worth it. I certainly donated some money to his page. And I'm actually able to download as many SVG files as I want, as long as I want. So it's definitely worth the investment. Moving back up here, we have this little optimized check mark. This should always be checked in my opinion. Moving down, it says automatic manual. I would just keep it at automatic. You can name your files later. Over here in the background area, I always keep this as white. For me, when I'm downloading SVG files, it doesn't really make a difference, so I keep it at white. Down here it says crop to. I also just keep this as visible keys. I don't do keys in key set or all keys. Let me show you what I mean by this. So if I just check this show cropping line, you see this blue box that goes around the fingering chart. Now this is going to be invisible when you download the SVG file. But if you click keys in key set, you see the box gets a bit bigger. And then if you click all keys, it gets even bigger. So for me, I'm just going to do just the visible keys. Any of the keys that I'm using for my fingering diagram, I want that little invisible blue line around it. Going down here is the instrument name. So look at all these different instruments. We have the Akai EWI, which is a funny little instrument. We have the 2 different kinds of bassoons here. We even have valved brass, but this video doesn't go into talking about this. We have the 2 different kinds of clarinets, flute, 2 different kinds of oboe. We even have the keyboard, which I'm not going to talk about, but you can do fingerings for the keyboard as well with this website. And then we have the recorder, we have saxophone. So he has all these different instruments. I think it's fantastic, but for us, we're going to stick to the flute. So I'm going to go back to the flute here, and we're going to work in this mode. Now going onwards here, we have show keys and press keys. I just leave this alone. I think that's the easiest thing to do there. And then down here, there's just going to be this huge mass of different kinds of fingerings that you can choose from here. So basically what this is what keys do you want to see? Now I find I don't have to touch many of these buttons here, except if I'm using half holes. On the right side here, we have different options for half holes. For me, I like to stick to the first one, lengthwise upper. And if we scroll back up to the actual fingering diagram, you see that we can actually select these half holes in the flute part. So look at that, you can actually select half holes. I think it's fantastic. And then I can actually select the ring of that fingering. So it's very versatile, and it's very useful if you want to use multiphonics or microtones for these fingerings. Now, if we're continuing on, you see all these different keywork details, which I mentioned before. And if we keep going down the list, right, you can actually set custom key sets. So if there's always the same set of keys that you use every time you do a fingering diagram, you can set a custom key set. I don't necessarily do this because I find that it just takes a bit too much work and I forget what I did. So I just always start from scratch every time I do a fingering, and then I just save that fingering as an SFG file, which I put into my computer. So I don't necessarily do this custom key set. And then on this side here, we have size, teeny, tiny, small, medium, large, huge. Since you're downloading an SFG file anyway, I just keep it at medium. I don't change the size of this at all. I just keep it there. And then the line thickness. Now, some people like thicker fingering diagrams. Some people like thinner fingering diagrams. I think the medium one is perfect. I don't change it. But if you want to see, this is what the thin one looks like. Okay. So scrolling back up, and let me just close this keywork details here so I don't have to keep scrolling. This is what it looks like if it's thin, but then look at what the heaviest one looks like. Super heavy, okay? So for me, I like sticking to the medium. I find that that's the most readable, especially for professional players. Now, for me at least, I like to keep the rotation of all my fingering diagrams vertical. So right now, this flute is horizontal. I want to keep it vertical. So let me first go back to a medium line thickness, okay? And then let's rotate this thing vertically. So I just click this, and now we have a vertical flute diagram, which is fantastic. Now, I'm going to head over to my clarinet concerto part so you can actually see what fingering diagram we need. So this is the fingering here. So we have a side key here, 2 filled-in keys, the last key here, and then this key right on the bottom over here. So this is fairly simple. We don't even need the half holes in this case. So let's go back here and figure that out. So let me first shut off the half holes since we don't need them. So let's go down to key work details and shut off the half holes. Okay. Now all the half holes should be off. Now we want to put the side key here and we want to fill in both these keys. Now you see that I am still getting that empty circle in the middle. So I think this is a little bit of a bug in this diagram, but this is very easy to fix. All I have to do is refresh, okay? And now we get a fresh fingering diagram, which is great. Exactly what we need. So let's figure this out. We have our side key, we have these 2 filled out, then we have the last one filled out, and then we have this one filled out. So all we have to do now is go to our download button here and actually download the file. So if I hit download here, you're going to see that it downloads as an SFG file on the bottom left here, which is great. And now what we're going to do is head over to Sibelius to actually import this file. Now you can use Dorico, you can use Finale, you can use any of the other notation programs for this. I'm just going to use Sibelius in this case. So let's head over to my Sibelius file here. Now you can already see that I already have the SFG file above this D half flat, okay? But I'm gonna try to import it one more time just to show you how I do it. So head over to Notations, then hit Graphic, then go ahead and hit Flute Microtone SFG. Yours could be called any number of things. For this particular example, I just chose this file name. Click Open, and then I'm gonna place it here. Now you see it's very large, okay? But you can scale it down and it'll look real good. So let's go ahead and shift click the corner. And now it's getting much smaller. Let me drag it up. Shift click again, make it smaller. And let me shift click one more time to make it even smaller. So now you'll see if I put them right next to each other, they're basically the same. One is a little bigger than the other, but that's okay. Now you see that it's very clear. It's going to be very readable, and your players are not going to have any problem reading something like this on their part. And now you can just save this as your flute D half flat fingering, and you can use it anytime you need to. And it's that easy. Then when you need to export the file as a PDF, you'll see that everything is nice and smooth and readable. Let me know in the description below what you think about this whole process. I find that this is one of the biggest tools that I use when I'm composing music, especially at the very end of the process when I'm engraving. It makes everything quite simple, and I find that also I end up saving a lot of these multiphonics or microtones or timbre trills in this fingering folder that I keep on my computer. That way I don't have to keep on making all these different fingering diagrams every time I need to use that particular fingering. If you found this video useful, go ahead and hit like, subscribe to the channel, ding those notification bells, and until next time, keep on writing and take care of yourself.